Hot takes are something that have been gaining attention over the last couple of years. It's no surprise that strong, controversial opinions tend to thrive in an environment such as the internet. The more messed up, the more attention it tends to get, especially if the hot take has some decent justification behind it. So when it comes to Berserk, which explores many avenues of darkness in the world, such as religion, power and SA, there's a strong chance that the hot takes will be extra spicy. In this video, I will discuss some of the fandom's hottest takes on Berserk. I created a post asking for your personal takes, and I thought many people wouldn't have had any, but yeah, I was wrong. So, thank you for that. So let's kick it off with the first one. Griffith did nothing. No, we ain't starting with that one. We need to warm up a little bit before we get there. Lost Children arc is peak Berserk. So my simple response to this is that I disagree. I tend to follow the crowd with this one. I think Golden Age arc is peak Berserk. And just to be annoying, the Lost Children isn't like an arc, it's actually chapters. I don't really know why people call it an arc. Anyways, I will say that the Lost Children chapters are highly favourable. Outside of the Golden Age arc, it's usually people's second or third favourite parts of the series. I think probably it's because of its subject matter, the return of the Black Swordsman persona, and some really dark imagery. And especially with the message it ends on, I think it hits deep for a lot of people. I just don't think it's on the same level as the Golden Age. To me, there is much more intrigue, like there's a certain level of tension that builds as you get close to the eclipse that is really juicy to me. I feel like the overall writing was at its strongest in the Golden Age. This isn't a huge hot take, but saying it is better than the Golden Age may be a bit spicier. But one that goes further is Golden Age arc is overrated. I feel like it's just a given that when something is considered to be the best, there are going to be a few people that are going to say that it's overrated. But in terms of this claim, perhaps for those who read the manga first, we're a bit disappointed for the lack of apostles in the Golden Age, considering the Black Swordsman arc is a world in which apostles are in like every village. Yet again, another reason for why I personally enjoyed my experience of starting Berserk on the second episode of the anime. So when an apostle does show up, it surprises you, which I assume would have less of an impact if you experienced the Black Swordsman arc beforehand. I do think that the Golden Age contains less of the overall aesthetic of Berserk, that being a big angry man with a big sword killing big demons. If anyone wants to expand on this take, please do in the comments below. Guts will end up marrying Shirka. Hey Gemini, how old is Guts in the Fantasia arc?
Guts is estimated to be about 24 years old during the Fantasia arc.
Thank you. How old is Shirka in the Fantasia arc?
Shirka is 13 years old during the Fantasia arc of Berserk.
So yeah, unless there is a giant time skip, this should not happen. And even if they do, it is still kind of weird because, it just is. I mean, I did ask for hot takes, and you delivered, whoever commented this. Farnice's redemption is undeserved. Alright, this commenter elaborated, so let's hear them out. She is quite literally one of the worst people in Berserk, up until she starts bettering herself through her care of Casca. The thing is that she only briefly, well barely ever actually confronts herself with her past. She acts like saving Casca could make up for the hundreds of lives brutally taken through her. Now this is only the tip of the iceberg. She's quite literally a sick pervert who gets off on burning innocent people alive. You can't excuse that, ever. And since her lustful side has morphed into something so horrible, I don't think she's changed. I think deep down she still has this dark lust and sickness. Let's unpack this first part. The idea of redemption is not about undoing what you have done, because that's just not possible. The beginning of redemption is about acknowledging your wrongdoing, which Farnice has made steps towards doing. One example of this is when she recognizes the flaws in the religious dude and acknowledges that she was just like that. And yes, helping Casca doesn't make up for what she did, but who is even arguing that? And the manga doesn't express that either, only that she is starting. I will say it again, starting in the right direction with protecting Casca, which Guts appreciates. You also say that she is a sick pervert who gets off by burning people alive. But yet again, that is the version of her she is trying to make steps away from. I don't really know what else you would want. Unless you just don't believe in forgiveness or redemption, I feel like there is no way that Farnice could earn that for you. Let's continue on with the rest of this comment. Now, you may call me a Farnice hater, and you wouldn't be wrong. I think she's truly despicable and was not deserving of her redemption plot. I think she's quite literally a worse version of Nina, worse in the moral sense. Now don't get me wrong though, Farnese is a well written character. I'm not saying Berserk would be better off without her, but I just think she's very hard to sympathise with, even when she redeems herself. So it does seem to me that you do have trouble with forgiveness for Farnese. And considering what she has done, I really don't blame you. But I believe, unless someone is purely evil, that there is always room for some type of forgiveness, if the individual has the intention and does enough to be deserving of it. For me personally, I like Farnese. She isn't purely evil, she's a product of her environment, for why she is the way she is when we first see her. But I think she has done good work which should at least be acknowledged, because a lot of bad people don't even go through that effort in the first place. I don't think she is fully redeemed, but yet again, the story isn't finished. I appreciate your opinion though. Farnese has the best character arc out of any character. So this one is more of an appreciation of Farnese, but like this take is about as hot as a coffee left out for 30 minutes. Like I don't think there's much competition. Yes, you've got Guts and Griffith, but Farnese is kind of like the Jaime Lannister of Berserk. She has the most obvious change out of the main cast of characters. She is definitely the strongest side character to me, definitely much more interesting than Isidro and Puck. I especially like how kind-hearted she has become and that she seems to have this natural connection with magic, which I hope gets explored further down the line why she has this like natural connection. I'm going to do an in-depth video for Nice eventually, which I'm sure a lot of you will like. There is a lot to discuss with her, so that video will take some time, so bear with me. Shirka is a Mary Sue. The commenter expanded on this and took too much screen time and continues to take too much screen time away from Guts and others. So Shirka is one of the more prominent side characters along with Farnese. I would agree that maybe her time on stream does take away from the other characters that need more depth, such as Isidro and Sepiko, but this isn't necessarily an issue as Shirka to me is a very likable and interesting character. She is a young girl who has been taught magic and is forced to deal with a very dangerous world. Also, the fact that her powers are effective against apostles make us feel that there is hope. We can fight back against the force that seems to be unstoppable. Now let's take a look at the first claim. Shirka is a Mary Sue. The definition of a Mary Sue is a bit wonky and it's hard to define when certain idiots keep throwing around the term all the time, where it ends up losing its meaning. The Oxford Dictionary defines it as this: a type of idealized female character, typically a young woman, unrealistically lacking in flaws or weaknesses. Now Shirka is a young female. Yes, that is true. But I don't want to get too autistic with this, but what does unrealistically lacking in flaws or weaknesses mean in the context of Berserk? Shirka has been training under Flora for most of her life. Despite Luke only training with Yoda for less time than what Shirka has, people don't call him a Gary Sue. You may say Vader was going easy on him, but literally Luke at one point overpowers him. So I think the power she has is reasonable. Plus, she can't just always use these big powers whenever she wants. She actually has to take time to do these special magic attacks, which leave her vulnerable. And the reason why she is much stronger than most of the main cast are is that she has magic when others don't. That is a major advantage. Also, compared to other mages in the world of Berserk, she is viewed as kinda noobish. Honestly, I don't feel too strongly about this. I never thought she was disproportionately powerful and a Mary Sue, but then again, if you believe she is, you have every right to that opinion. Berserk should not be released on a per chapter basis. I feel the same way about this as I do with how a lot of TV shows choose to release episodes. I remember it was frustrating to wait every week for one episode of The Flash to air. And I don't like what The Boys do where they only release a handful of episodes instead of the full series. I think it's a very annoying practice. Unfortunately, in terms of the manga industry, it's a situation that is not great for any party. I'll play a part in one of my videos at 2x speed that illustrates the problem with the slow chapter releases.
If we want more chapters at a faster rate, the quality will likely suffer and people will lose interest and Berserk will become a shell of what it once was. If we want high quality chapters to come out quickly, that means that the creatives behind it will have to live a life that revolves around nothing but Berserk. It's not fair on the creatives, so the only scenario that is possible is the one that has been present for a decent amount of time. High quality chapters at a slower rate.
Another take on a similar topic would be Miura was lazy. Now, Kentaro has passed, so I don't want to disrespect him. Another person added that he had 20 years to complete it. Now, I always stand by the idea that creatives don't owe the audience anything. George R.R. Martin gets a lot of flack for not finishing his book, and though I would love to see the ending, I'm not going to form a negative view of him because of it. But I will say it does get to a point where if an artist sets out to do something and they haven't yet done it after a long period of time, then you can understand the outrage more. Miura had a long time to finish Berserk, but for whatever reason, he failed to do so. He started slowing down after Griffith's reincarnation, and another commenter says that he was being irresponsible with his health, most likely having depression. While we don't know the full extent of his personal life, Miura would at some point change his schedule to better accommodate his health and would bring people in to help on his work. This signifies that he did need a helping hand with continuing his story. It is a shame that he did not finish it, but with what he has given us anyways, I can't be too upset that Berserk never got its true ending. But some people are more critical of Miura, such as this take here shows. Miura has a grape fetish. I just want to give a heads up, when talking about these adult topics, I have to modify my language because YouTube doesn't really like it. I honestly do treat these topics with the seriousness that is needed. I just have to play nice with YouTube. I hope you understand that. So yeah, this one isn't really fun and games, is it? I thought this was supposed to be fun, damn it. Let's do some light exploring on this one. I don't really want to go in depth with it because it really doesn't interest me all that much. I really only care about the art itself, but potentially by exploring this we might understand more of the questionable decisions made in Berserk. Okay, it is hard to find good evidence that Miura was indeed into that type of stuff. For one, just by nature of Kentaro writing dark stuff, there is going to be dark material in his work. People criticise George R. R. Martin for his depictions of certain things. Stephen King had a scene in his book where children have a certain type of party, let's say. My point is, many authors write about dark material. It doesn't necessarily mean they are for it. Sure, I would say some of Miura's work is questionable. I find the depictions of women when they are getting odd to be debatable, and his panel of Shirka, that is probably the strongest case for Miura having some kind of weird lolly thing. But I just simply think there isn't enough evidence to make such claims. And plus, he is no longer with us, so it is pointless now. But seeing as we're talking about explicit content in Berserk, the next take is what I saw a lot of people were echoing in the comments. Too much SA / its handling is poor. Now guys, I know a lot of you said this, but come on, at best this is a lukewarm take. It's almost like the one unifying thing about Berserk that we can all agree on as being one of its shortcomings. Now, a lot of people have had many different things to say about this, so let's go through some of them. Way too much exploitation, especially with Casca. The entire scene with Wild and Casca didn't have to go that far. It is there to show how deplorable it is, but disgusting people get off to it, and so much of it doesn't have to be shown to that extent. Now, if you're a fan of my channel, you should know by now that I don't have a good view of the Casca and Wild scene. I think what would truly make me okay with this scene is if the eclipse had never happened, but it makes much more sense for it to happen there, so the Wild scene should just not have included that. Also, these events happen so close to each other, the Wild stuff is still somewhat in the back of your mind when the eclipse happens, and Casca in general is subjected to too much exploitation, and I'm glad that it seemed to have significantly slowed down as Miura aged and brought more people onto the team. The subject of SA in Berserk is handled poorly more often than not, as most of it is utilised for shock value and could easily be removed. There are only a few instances of SA that have lasting consequences on the story. I think Miura himself may have realised this to an extent, and that's why midway through the Millennium Falcon arc we start to see less of it. It honestly feels like I wrote this. Whoever you are, we are on the same wavelength. I would say that I am a little bit more charitable towards it, but I think like most instances of it happening after the eclipse shouldn't be necessary. I get it, it's good for us to recognise the horror of the reality, and perhaps the more people are exposed to it in a fictional context, the more we can deepen our understanding and empathy as a human race. But my fear is that too much SA is prevalent in Berserk that it becomes white noise. I can't remember if I said this in another video, but in my removed part of things I dislike about Berserk video, I mentioned that such topics as grape should never become just white noise, as I believe it could, I'm not saying it will, but it could have a crossover to the real world, and that is what I fear. And yes, I also agree with the fact that Miura had seemed to realise it himself, that perhaps he was putting too much of it in his story. This is the same with Stephen King, who after aging more and hearing the criticisms of the It sewer scene, reflects saying he should approach those topics with more sensitivity. Another commenter echoes this too. This takes away some of the shock factor, using that term loosely, from the eclipse because it happens so many times, and that desensitization should not happen. I'm glad Miura had moved away from this past golden age, and it allowed the most disgusting and horrifying moments to be isolated and felt more to the audience, like Guts assaulting a broken casket in the midst of protecting her. Going back to Mr. King once again, if I remember correctly, he did pose a question as to why more people have a problem with children doing dirty acts together than the actual murder of the children in his story. And this can be related to why some people are more repulsed by SA in fiction than by the killing of someone. So, of course, killing isn't a good thing. Wow, like hot take. And I won't be denying that. But killing can be morally permissible. If someone broke into your home and threatened your life, acting in self-defense is very justifiable. You also got war, and maybe the person who got killed was a terrible person and deserved to die. That one is a little messy, but it can work out as being understandable. What I'm trying to say is that there are circumstances in which killing is justified, but there is never ever a time when grape is a justified act. It just doesn't make sense why someone would morally do that action. It's mostly always because of their sadistic gratification. I also think there's a disconnection with murder that cannot be had with grape. Like, most of us don't have real life emotional connection to killing, but just by virtue of us being humans and how we reproduce with one another, there is a more emotional involvement with grape because we can connect more easily to it than murder. Also, the likelihood of you knowing someone who has experienced SA versus the killing of someone is significant. So the TLDR is that it isn't as morally permissible and it cuts more emotionally deep. Because of this, it means it is very difficult to write it in a fictional story without it being gratuitous, and that's why most writers should stay away from writing it in their story. I mean, yeah, I think the majority of the fandom, though they love Berserk, can understand one of its shortcomings is to do with the subject of SA. I think Kentaro may do better than most, but my main contention with it is more to do with how it is depicted. If the women were truly in this horrific scenario, they wouldn't be positioned like they are on the hub. It should be more visceral looking if you truly wanted to show the dark but true reality of it. It only rings more true when most people who have a problem with Berserk's use of grape don't actually have a problem with why it happens in their clips, but more of how it is visually shown. Griffith is right. It is a false utopia to a false god, but a utopia nonetheless. Now, this is the light version of the Griffith did nothing wrong argument, like a babyfied version. But this one is a little bit more nuanced and valid. Because Miura, after the eclipse, intentionally wrote Griffith so it would make you feel conflicted about your feelings, considering he seems to be building a better world. Maybe. I mean, Falconia was something he took advantage of, which is a terrible situation. Which is smart for a ruler to do to gain more power, but it still shows that Griffith lusts for power very greatly. So this take, I like to look at it a bit like something such as America. America was built by violence. The history of pretty much every country in the world is bloody. I know America isn't perfect, but in comparison to what it used to be, it is better. It's known as the land of freedom. But false utopia indicates that it is built on deception, and deceptive Griffith most definitely is. There should be more positive representations of faith. One of the great things about Berserk is how it highlights the many evils of humanity. One of them is the weaponization of religion. The Conviction arc is obviously where Kentaro explores this the most. Throughout history, religion has been used to justify atrocities. It's been a way for people to rationalize their hateful behavior towards others. It doesn't help when some of these religions have violence built into them, which only further justifies the terrible beliefs of people who use religion as a weapon. I think it is good that Miura explored the corruption of religion, as it has forever had an impact on the world. Still today, people are using religion to spread their harmful beliefs, and I know there aren't really any positive representations of faith in Berserk, but I don't think Miura was anti-religion. I think he was more critiquing the over-reliance on it, the distortion of it, Moscus being the perfect allegory for this. Lost Children arc is the worst arc. Again, it's not an arc, it's chapters. So maybe comparing a selection of chapters to a full arc isn't exactly fair to begin with. But yes, this is for sure a hot take. But I can't really find a reason as to why someone would consider it to be weak, apart from the people who viewed it as a more filler aspect of the series, because it happens after the eclipse and you're so focused on the Griffith and Guts dynamic. This section takes a break away from that, so I can see how people would be like, man, I just want to get back to Guts hunting Griffith. Also, it's more focused on Jill and Rosine, and you're not as invested in them as characters, unlike Guts. So perhaps because it's a self-contained story, is the reason someone may not like it that much. But apart from that one, I have trouble understanding this one. Black Swordsman arc is better than Golden Age. Okay, wow, this one is pretty nuts. While the Black Swordsman arc is great, it is widely viewed as the weakest part of Berserk for its tone and lack of cohesiveness. And yeah, once you recontextualize it, it makes it even better. But still, I think Miura, if he could do it all over again, knowing where the story eventually goes, I'm sure he would alter things in the first arc for it to be more consistent. There are a few elements that seem to be off, such as Griffith not feeling 100% consistent with his future established character. Also, a lot of people think this arc is a bit overly edgy and that the Golden Age arc is what offers the true depth of storytelling. So while the Black Swordsman arc is good and not bad by any means, it is just in my opinion weaker than all other arcs. The God Hand don't have enough lore. I don't even know if this is a hot take, but I 100% agree. I think the biggest lore we get from them is during the eclipse, and you get little scraps from there on out. It seems towards the last chapters that Miura did that we were going to dip our toes into it once again. But man, that's like over 200 chapters since the eclipse. I have a feeling that we're not going to get a comprehensive lore on the God Hand. I think it's always going to be mysterious. That way it's easier for the writers, and I think when it comes to very high powers, the more we don't know, the more they retain their power. But we do need a little bit more. Like, how did all the God Hand come to be? Clearly there used to be different ones beforehand, and Void seems like the one that has been around for the longest. What's his story? And can we get some more information for who they serve and how all that works out? I'm not sure we will get an answer, but I would love to. Also, since Skull Knight has a connection to them, I feel like we do need some answers. Not all of them, but just give us a few more, please. Way too many fight scenes. Way too many fight scenes. And quite often it's really difficult to understand what's even happening in the fight. Now, I do like the fight scenes. They're cool and show some of the best panels in the series, but I do think I much prefer the drama side of Berserk, rather than the action. I do sometimes struggle to understand what is going on in some battles. I think the more people who are involved in the fight sequences, the harder it is to understand. I don't have this problem nearly as much with just the one-on-one fights, but despite all of that, I think Miura does it pretty well, all things considered. Drawn battle scenes is no easy task. Some of my favourite battles are Griffith and Guts, Rosine and Guts, and Ganishka versus everyone. That one was an example of doing a battle right where it has lots of people. And I'm sure there's other manga out there that is way harder to understand what is going on in the fights than Berserk. They shouldn't be two comic relief characters. Give Isidro more to do, please. He has so much potential to be an incredible character. Puck is good, but maybe change the chestnut design. He was a good way to ease how heavy the story is, but still had a purpose. Now the both of them just feel like jokes without a purpose. Yeah, so the idea of a comic relief character in a story as dark as Berserk is needed. I agree on that, but only dedicate that role to one character. Because the more comic relief characters there are, the more it detracts from the overall theme and vibe of what the story is trying to do. Now, I'm fine with Puck being a bit whimsical, after all he is an elf, but he was by far at his best during the Black Swordsman and Conviction arc. I really want to get back to that Puck, but Isidro just feels like a one-note character at this point. I think if you want to make one character the comic relief, Isidro would be the best bet, as I feel like Puck has more depth than him so far. I think Isidro needs to be expanded upon, because we really haven't gotten much depth to him. Comic reliefs don't have to be devoid of it. I think the increasingly more silly moments in Berserk is a significant factor in it drifting away from the dark fantasy genre. I don't think this one is too much of a hot take. I think the majority may agree with this one. Zod is the worst apostle.
You damned fool.
So I wish the person who said this had explained why they think this. Because for me, Zod is the best apostle because he's the one we've spent the most time with. He is also, in my opinion, the coolest, despite being Griffith's Uber. I think his design is very effective. It is the typical satanic bestial look that we immediately understand as evil and threatening. If you experience the Golden Age first, I think he is a much better introduction to the apostles than the Snake Baron. He tends to be part of the more intelligent and formidable group of apostles. He's probably top dog in that regard, considering he has killed other apostles and ordered them to obey Griffith. Zod seems to be the captain, whereas Femto is the general. I would like people to expand upon why Zod is a weak character. Griffith is a weak character. So this one commenter had a lot to say, and I would recommend reading it all. But it does highlight some of the potential issues with Berserk. Unfortunately, I ain't going to be responding to all of it, as this video will already be longer than I want it to be, and I'm not too prepared to go into great depth talking about causality. But I do want to talk about the few who view Griffith as a weak character. This is what the commenter has to say about Griffith. For Femto/Griffith, he is only interesting because of the good character writing which has ceased ever since the Golden Age arc ended, and the 30 years of hatred for this man. Without the Golden Age's writing, he's essentially a one-dimensional tyrant. Later, they again bring up the idea that Griffith is one note. Okay, I think Griffith is probably my favourite villain, so of course I will argue against this. Firstly, I think Griffith is definitely at his best in the Golden Age. There seems to be no disagreement over that. But for his characterization for the entire story after that section, that is where this person's problem starts. So here is my response to the one-dimensional comment. It kinda makes sense that Griffith, after stripping away his humanity, or most of it, and becoming one of the God Hand, that he would seem to be more shallow. because he is no longer human and is something far different. I really enjoy the fact that in the Golden Age, we felt like, in a way, we were in a group with Griffith. We were in the same scenes with him. But ever since his transformation, there has been this distance that has been put in between us and Griffith. It is less intimate. Even the way he is framed, it is more like watching someone on a stage from far away rather than being in the same small room as them. This polarization makes it effective to me. We can no longer relate to him in any capacity. Also, this may sound weird, but what is wrong with a character being one-dimensional? There is a common assumption that when we hear of something being one-dimensional, that is bad. But look at Emperor Palpatine. You can describe him as fitting the one-note description, yet I think the majority believe that he is a great villain. In fact, he is a lot of people's favourite villain. Some think he's better than Darth Vader. So I do not think a bad villain is attributed to them being one-note. I think it lies in villains having a weak motivation. What is interesting and complex about Griffith is that because of the eclipse, we just assume that he is a pure evil villain, but he actually seems to have noble goals, such as creating a utopia. I kinda already talked about this earlier with the person who thinks Griffith is right. Now I said seems because he is a villain after all, so we are yet to figure out his true intentions. But just by the fact that people are having discussions about Griffith's morality, whether he is misunderstood or not, and if he did nothing wrong, speaks to some level of complexity with his character, which means he isn't essentially one-dimensional. Again, feel free to argue with this, but to me, I love Griffith's character. I hate him, but he is a great villain. Casca is a weak character. Now this one is a tricky one for me because I love Casca. I think she is definitely in my top 5 favourite female characters. I've always been a fan of the badass female type characters. But here is the thing, Casca is only that for the Golden Age, and the Golden Age is when she is at her best. There are many things you can talk about with her character in the Golden Age, but when it comes to everything after that, up until the point where she has her mind fixed, you could probably summarise everything that happened in those 200 plus chapters in a single paragraph. Here is one commenter's view on it. Aftermath focus on Casca is a dicey, weird cop-out, given we could have explored the duality of trauma between her and Guts, rather than being sidelined as Elaine. Even if Miura tried at least to fix that problem with Varnice and Shirka going into her mind, it just felt like they could have explored more with her rather than her being sidelined post-eclipse. Other than that, Casca was kinda done dirty to rather give Guts a character arc rather than both of them. Writing wise, I actually like how Casca's character is fresh off the eclipse, because we feel like Guts in that scene. We are like, okay, that was horrific, but we escaped. We are safe now. We have each other, only to realise that things are not okay, as Casca's mind is broken. This is a constant reminder of the eclipse to Guts. It's like a scar in the form of a person. I think it's half the reason he went off on his vengeance mission. But that being said, it does sideline Casca. Her character development is severely stunted for a long time. Perhaps Miura didn't know how to explore both Guts and Casca's combined trauma from it, so he just made her a potato. That way it justifies not being able to explore that concept, which is a quite smart thing to do as a writer if he wasn't prepared for the duality of trauma between the two. What really doesn't help is that Casca is put in the role of a damsel in distress often, and every now and then, she is the victim of and if that isn't happening to her, she is making dumb noises or has her melons hanging out. She is like a potato and the writing treats her as such. Another comment expressed a similar thought. My hottest take, Miura did Casca dirty. After the eclipse, Miura made the decision to sacrifice Casca in order to give Guts his character arc. Guts' arc after the eclipse is basically, will he choose revenge or will he choose Casca? In order for Guts to choose her, Miura needed Casca to be in a state where she cannot protect herself and is basically crazy. If Casca hadn't lost her mind, Guts wouldn't have a reason to come looking for Casca in the conviction arc, and his story would be way different and darker than what we have today. I am torn with this decision, as on one hand, it gives Guts a beautiful arc where he finds a new group of people to care about in the later arcs, but it also makes Casca a shell of her former self. It's good that now that the era of Casca being in a comatose-like state is over, it seems like we will explore the trauma that should have been explored after the eclipse. Because Casca, despite having her mind fixed, is still not 100% good. Also, lots of the fandom think Varnice and Shirka are better characters in general. So I'm not sure if this is a hot take or not, but I don't think Casca is a weak character. I just think she has way more potential to be utilised. Casca liked it.
Police! Help! Police! Help! Police! Help!
Yeah, this is usually said by Griffith glazers, who want to defend Griffith so badly that they have to delude themselves into thinking such things as Casca enjoyed getting essayed. Not to sound like a SJW or anything, but I can 100% guarantee that anyone who unironically says this is a man. And ladies, you should be careful of your drink around people like this. But let's actually take this seriously, shall we? So the evidence for this argument is that there are a few panels that showcase that Casca doesn't seem to be in tremendous anguish during the grape scene. In fact, some say she looks like she's enjoying it, and the movies kinda portray this too. But here's the thing, we cannot control an uncontrollable unconscious response. This is one of the many devastating things about SA. It is complex, but usually victims, even if they did have a response that indicated that they might like it, after it has happened, usually they are filled with shame and disgust at themselves. And I know there is a quote from Miura floating around about it that people try to use, but I am unsure about the translation and all that. So people who really bat for Griffith try to use the Casca liked it argument, but it is an argument hanging on by the smallest, thinnest thread you've ever seen. Griffith did nothing wrong.
And here we go.
The one you knew that was going to be featured in here. Funnily enough, people that believe this tend to be more nuanced than the previous take. Because I think a majority of defenders of Griffith usually go, I don't agree with the grip of Casca, but everything else is justified. Such as this guy's comment who thinks the argument is valid without the grip. I still don't agree, however. And then on the other side, you've got people saying that Femto and Griffith are just two different people, so it wasn't Griffith doing the act, and that is just pure copium. And I have to take into account that the most people who say this are just trolls. There's a video by Alexander that goes into great depth that I recommend watching. Though I have some problems with some of the claims he makes, the video is pretty nuanced. The reason why this topic is even a debate is that some people can't figure out Griffith. Because he is a narcissist and has a facade on for the majority of his time in the story, it is hard to figure out his true intentions, thoughts and feelings. But there are a few instances that show that Griffith is not totally heartless. He does in fact care about people. This actually causes his downfall as he had an emotional attachment to Guts, something he made a point to avoid with his comrades. So when it comes to his ultimate decision, it's not like he doesn't care about the people he sacrifices. After all, you can only sacrifice something that is close to your heart. It just happens that he cares more about himself than others. Apart from Guts and potentially Casca, Griffith views his soldiers as high quality tools really. Think of it like this, the device that you're watching this on right now. I have no doubt that you care about it. If someone came into your room and destroyed it, that would hurt you. But I'm sure if there was a hypothetical scenario in which you had to destroy the device to keep yourself alive, you would. That's how I view Griffith's decision and his relationship with others. Remember, he was not forced to make the sacrifice. It was his decision to make it. Whatever came before it, the torture and all the stuff he went through, it was Griffith's decision that caused the Band of the Hawk to be destroyed. And his decision to grape Casca was done to punish both Guts and Casca and to establish power and dominance over them. Which, why would a supposed heartless demon that has emotions stripped away from them need to do? That's why I, along with a lot of others, believe that Femto and Griffith are not detached from one another. Femto is simply Griffith without restraint. People argue that Griffith did this for his eventual reincarnation. That could be true, but that doesn't mean that the other reason is also not true. Two things can be true at the same time. I would like to go more in depth, but I will save my discussion about Griffith for the future video I will make about him. Because right now I am talking about many different things and it's taking up quite a bit of time. Other hot takes. Now this is more of a lightning round. These are ones that I didn't really know how to respond in depth or had the time. Pippin is a very overrated character. I've never heard much discussion about this character. I don't think people are given the impression that he's an outstanding character. And I don't see people saying he's an awful character also. He's just kinda there. He's fine. I don't care about Guts. In Berserk people are dying so much. I don't know why I should be particularly concerned about this one person. Yes, he wants his revenge and I want to see him get his revenge, but because of the lack of explanation, I'm just going to assume his character just may not be for you. Revenge stories are common and they are good because they can, on a surface level, feel satisfying for a person to get their payback. But sometimes they can go deeper and showcase the damage that revenge can do to people. It just depends on whether you like the character or not. You've got Kill Bill, John Wick and The Last of Us Part 2. Some people love these stories, others hate them. Berserk is better without Wile's apostle form. He's more intimidating in this original form and takes some of the impact away from the eclipse. I agree, and I made both of these arguments in my video about him. Probably a lukewarm take. Griffith is wrong, but if I was in his position, I would have done the exact same thing. This one right here, officer, this one here. Nah, I'm kidding. Well, I hope you're not including the grape and you're just talking about the sacrifice part. I think he can feel sorry for what he went through and all that, but he did doom others to a horrific death to save himself, opposite of what a self-sacrificing hero is. Goro is in the top 10 best written characters in Berserk. I mean, sure, I don't really have a problem with this. My ranking would probably be a bit different. He is a greatly written character nevertheless. Miura wrote Guts as a personification of his audience, and a warning to his fans about obsessing over things, like the manga that we have no control over. I just wanted to include this one because I love this interpretation. It could indeed be something that Miura was trying to illustrate. The 16/17 anime is awesome.
Get out of here.
Bonebeard was not as bad as you and other fans think, especially since characters like frickin' Adon, who were basically Golden Age's Bonebeard, and fans were fine with him. So I included him in the things I don't like about Berserk. It's not that Bonebeard is necessarily a terrible character, it's just one of the very few weak parts of Berserk for me. That is all. We need a cool/badass female character that's not getting assaulted, not fan service material, or stinking lolly. We have Farnese. We have Luca. We have we have Shirka. Maybe Danan? Okay, maybe. Rosine was right to attack her village. Understandable, not justifiable. I hate how people focus on how Mori isn't going to accurately show the story to its end. It is awful we lost such an incredible artist prematurely, and before he finished his work. We will never see his true vision for the ending, but that's all the more reason to appreciate the work we did get to see. Mori knows the ending and is getting there well. We just have to write it out and see where it goes. I generally agree with this, but I also understand why certain people think it ended at chapter 364. Guts isn't a hero or a good person. He's just a traumatized protagonist that has great writing to explain his messed up actions. A hero wouldn't use children as bait or tell a kid to off themselves because they're depressed. That's why he is the protagonist and not named as the hero of the story. There seems to be no heroes in this story. Guts does a lot of bad stuff in this story, but I think some characters have done far worse. I'd rather be in a room with Guts than a lot of other characters featured in this story. Alright, I hope you enjoyed exploring some of these hot takes. What do you or don't you agree with? Sorry I couldn't go too in depth with some of these, though I would have liked to. Consider subscribing and liking this video, and I'll see you in the next one.